When you've lost everything, sometimes all you need is each other. It's never too late to build a new life, even from the ashes. In the fall of 2019, 5 people sat around a broken kitchen table in a condemned building on Riverside Avenue in Detroit, Michigan. The house was scheduled for demolition in 30 days. The neighborhood around it had been steadily dying for decades: abandoned homes, boarded-up businesses, empty lots where communities used to thrive. These 5 people had nothing. Literally nothing. Between them, they had $437 in cash, no jobs, no homes, no family support, and nowhere to go. The average age of the group was 67 years old. There was Walter Jackson, 71, a former auto worker who'd lost everything in the 2008 financial crisis. Dorothy Chen, 68, whose restaurant had failed, leaving her bankrupt and homeless. Frank Williams, 65, a Vietnam veteran dealing with PTSD, addiction, and decades of bad choices. Marie Johnson, 64, who'd fled an abusive marriage with nothing but the clothes on her back. And Samuel Sam Rodriguez, 69, a former teacher whose gambling addiction had cost him his pension, his home, and his dignity. 5 broken people. 5 lives destroyed by circumstances, mistakes, bad luck, and a society that had forgotten them. They'd met at a homeless shelter 6 months earlier and had formed an unlikely bond. When the shelter closed due to funding cuts, they'd been squatting in this condemned house, knowing their time was running out. 30 days, Walter said, looking at the demolition notice. Then we're back on the streets. We could split up, Dorothy suggested half-heartedly. Try different shelters in different areas. No, Marie said firmly. We stay together. We're all we've got. Frank nodded. She's right. We're family now. Broken, messed up family, but family. Sam, the eternal optimist despite everything, smiled. Then we need a plan. A real plan. Not just survival, I mean a plan to actually live again. They laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it seemed so impossible. How do 5 elderly people with nothing rebuild their lives from absolute zero? This is the story of how they did exactly that. It's about friendship in the darkest times, creativity born from desperation, and the incredible power of people who refuse to give up even when every odd is stacked against them. It's a story for every older American who's faced financial devastation, who's wondered if it's too late to start over, who's felt invisible and forgotten by a world that moves too fast and cares too little. Because sometimes, when you've lost everything, you discover what really matters. And sometimes, the most beautiful things are built from ruins. Walter Jackson had done everything right. He'd worked at the Ford Motor Company for 37 years, starting on the assembly line at age 21 and eventually becoming a supervisor. He married his high school sweetheart, Joyce, in 1970. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. They bought a modest house in a working-class Detroit neighborhood. They saved money. They planned for retirement. Walter was the definition of the American dream. Hard work, loyalty, playing by the rules. Then 2008 happened. The financial crisis hit Detroit like a bomb. The auto industry collapsed. Ford, while surviving better than GM and Chrysler, still had massive layoffs. Walter, at 60, was let go along with thousands of others. His pension, which he'd been counting on, was slashed by 40% due to company restructuring. "We'll be okay," Joyce said. "We have savings. You can find something else." But finding work at 60 in a devastated economy proved impossible. Walter applied for hundreds of jobs, retail, security, anything. He was either overqualified or too old. His savings dwindled. They refinanced their house to keep up with bills. Then Joyce got sick. Ovarian cancer. The medical bills were catastrophic. Even with insurance, the co-pays, the experimental treatments, the travel to specialists, it consumed everything. Joyce died in 2012. Walter was 64, broke, and broken. His house went into foreclosure. His children, struggling with their own financial problems in a terrible economy, couldn't help. His son had moved to Texas for work. His daughters were barely keeping their own heads above water. Walter ended up in a studio apartment, then a room in a boarding house, then his car, then the streets. The fall from middle-class stability to homelessness took just 4 years. By 2015, Walter was 67 and living in homeless shelters. He was ashamed, depressed, and couldn't understand how his entire life had collapsed so completely. He'd done everything right. How had he ended up here? Dorothy Chen came to America from Taiwan in 1975 at age 24. She worked 3 jobs: waitress, house cleaner, factory worker, saving every penny. Her dream was to open a restaurant, to share the food of her childhood, to build something of her own. It took her 20 years. In 1995, at age 44, she opened Dorothy's Kitchen in a small storefront in Detroit. It was tiny, just 10 tables, but it was hers. She worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. The restaurant became known for authentic Taiwanese cuisine and Dorothy's warm hospitality. Her husband, James, had died young from a heart attack in 2001, leaving her alone but with insurance money that she invested back into the restaurant. Business was good. She even opened a second location in 2005. Then the recession hit. Customers stopped coming. Fine dining was the first luxury people cut. Dorothy held on as long as she could, draining her savings, taking out loans. She closed the second location. Then, in 2010, she had to close the original restaurant too. She was 59 years old and $200,000 in debt. The bankruptcy was devastating. Dorothy lost everything: the restaurant equipment she'd bought over years, her small condo, her savings, everything. She tried to get work in other restaurants, but she was too old, too slow, and the younger chefs didn't respect her experience. She ended up working cash-only jobs cleaning houses, living in a room she rented from a family, barely surviving. In 2017, at 66, the family had to sell their house. Dorothy, with nowhere to go and no money for first month's rent and deposit anywhere else, became homeless. The shame was overwhelming. She'd worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and ended up with nothing. She avoided the Asian community in Detroit, unable to face people who'd known her when she was successful. Frank Williams went to Vietnam in 1969 at age 19. He came back in 1971 a different person. He'd seen things, done things, lost friends in ways that haunted him every night. PTSD wasn't well understood back then. Frank was told to man up and move on. So he tried. He got a job as a mechanic. He married a woman named Sandra. They had a daughter, Lisa. But Frank was falling apart inside. He had nightmares. He drank to sleep. He pushed away anyone who tried to get close. Sandra left him in 1978, taking Lisa with her. Frank spiraled. He went from job to job, never lasting more than a few months. His drinking got worse. He started using drugs, anything to numb the memories. He was arrested several times for bar fights, DUIs, possession. He'd get clean for a while, relapse, get clean again. He was in and out of VA programs. He lived in various apartments, boarding houses, sometimes his truck. His daughter wanted nothing to do with him. She'd learned to protect herself from his chaos. By the time Frank was in his 50s, he'd been homeless multiple times. He'd get a job, save up, get an apartment, then relapse and lose everything. The cycle repeated over and over. In 2015, at 61, Frank had a moment of clarity. He checked himself into a VA rehab program and got sober. Really sober, for the first time in decades. He started processing his trauma with a therapist. He began to understand his PTSD. But by then, his work history was so spotty, his age so advanced, that finding employment was nearly impossible. He was living in a VA transitional housing program when it lost funding in 2018. At 64, Frank was homeless again, but this time sober and determined to stay that way. Marie Johnson's story was different. She hadn't lost everything to economic forces or personal demons. She'd lost everything running for her life. Marie married Richard Johnson in 1975 when she was 20. He was charming, successful, protective. At first, the abuse started small: criticism, controlling behavior, isolating her from friends and family. Then it became physical. Slaps. Pushes. Worse. Marie stayed for 40 years, trapped by fear, by financial dependence, by shame, by the belief that she'd made her bed and had to lie in it. She and Richard had 2 children, both sons. The boys witnessed the abuse growing up. One became an abuser himself. The other moved far away and rarely contacted her, wanting distance from the dysfunction. Richard was careful. He never hit her where bruises would show. He controlled all the money. He monitored her phone calls. He made sure she was completely dependent on him. Marie worked part-time at a library, but her paycheck went into an account only Richard controlled. The years went by. Marie became smaller, quieter, more invisible. She was afraid all the time. She thought about leaving thousands of times but didn't know how. Where would she go? She had no money, no resources, no support system. Then, in 2018, at age 63, Richard beat her so badly she ended up in the hospital with broken ribs. A social worker talked to her, really talked to her, and Marie finally broke down. She told the truth. All of it. The social worker helped her leave. She went to a women's shelter with nothing but a hospital gown and borrowed clothes. Richard was arrested, but he had a good lawyer. He was out on bail quickly. Marie's sons didn't support her. One blamed her for ruining Dad's life. The other didn't want to get involved. She was alone, at 63, with no money, no job history worth anything, no home, and a restraining order that didn't make her feel any safer. The women's shelter could only keep her for 60 days. After that, she was homeless. She moved between various shelters, terrified Richard would find her, struggling to navigate a world she'd been sheltered from for 40 years. Sam Rodriguez had been a good man once. A great man, even. He taught high school English for 35 years in Detroit public schools. He was the teacher students remembered, the one who made literature come alive, who saw potential in kids everyone else had given up on. Sam married late, at 42, to a wonderful woman named Christina. They had one daughter, Isabel. Life was good. Sam made a decent living, had a pension coming, owned a small house. Then Christina died of breast cancer in 2010. Sam was 60, devastated, and didn't know how to cope with the loss. A friend took him to the casino to take his mind off things. Sam won $500 that first night. It felt good, felt like a distraction from the pain. He went back, and back, and back. Within a year, Sam had a serious gambling problem. He told himself he could control it, that it was just entertainment, that he'd quit anytime. But addiction doesn't work that way. He gambled away his savings. Then he started borrowing money. Then he took out a second mortgage on his house. Then he borrowed from the wrong people, loan sharks who didn't accept excuses. When he couldn't pay, they threatened his daughter. Sam, desperate to protect Isabel, gave them everything. The deed to his house, his car, everything he owned. They still wanted more. Sam's principal found out about the gambling when the loan sharks showed up at the school looking for him. He was forced to retire early in 2013 at 63. His pension was reduced because he didn't wait until 65. That pension then went mostly to paying off debts. Isabel, scared and angry, moved away and cut contact. "Dad, you need help. But I can't watch you destroy yourself." Sam hit rock bottom. He joined Gamblers Anonymous and stopped gambling. But the damage was done. He had no home, minimal income from his reduced pension, and crushing debt. He moved into a cheap apartment, then couldn't afford that. By 2017, at 67, he was homeless. But Sam had stayed away from gambling for 4 years. He attended GA meetings religiously. He knew his disease, understood his triggers, and was determined never to gamble again. He just needed a chance to rebuild his life. The 5 of them met at Hope Haven Homeless Shelter in Detroit in early 2019. It was a basic shelter, rows of cots, communal meals, limited resources, but at least it was warm and safe. Walter noticed Dorothy first. She was sitting alone at dinner, eating quietly, looking smaller than her actual size. Something about her loneliness mirrored his own. "This seat taken?" he asked. Dorothy looked up, surprised anyone was talking to her. "No, please." They ate in silence for a while. Then Walter said, "I'm Walter. Used to work at Ford." Dorothy. "I had a restaurant." Used to. Had. Walter laughed bitterly. The words of our generation. Dorothy smiled slightly. "What happened to you?" 2008. Cancer. Foreclosure. The usual American tragedy. You. Same crisis. Different details. I lost my restaurant. They talked through dinner. It felt good to connect with someone who understood the shame, the confusion of how life could fall apart so completely. Frank was harder to get to know. He kept to himself, attended AA meetings at the shelter, read his books, didn't engage much. But Walter noticed him. Something about Frank's eyes, the haunted look, was familiar. Walter's uncle had been in Vietnam. "You serve?" Walter asked one day, sitting next to Frank. "Long time ago." "My uncle was in Nam. He had a hard time after." Frank nodded. "Most of us did." That was the beginning. Frank slowly opened up to Walter, then to Dorothy. The three of them formed a small group, sitting together at meals, watching out for each other. Marie arrived at the shelter in February 2019, terrified, jumping at every sound. She was assigned a cot next to Dorothy. That first night, she had nightmares and woke up crying. Dorothy, hearing her, came over. "You're safe here. Whatever you're afraid of, it's not in this room." Marie looked at this small Asian woman with kind eyes and started crying again. "My husband, he hurt me. For so long. I left, but I'm so scared." "He's not here," Dorothy said firmly. "And if he comes, we'll protect you. You're not alone anymore." Dorothy introduced Marie to Walter and Frank. Frank, with his military training, took Marie's safety seriously. "I'll teach you self-defense basics. You'll never be helpless again." Walter added, "And we'll make sure someone's always around. You're part of our group now." Sam was the last to join. He arrived in March, obviously educated, well-spoken, carrying books in his backpack. He kept to himself initially, attending his GA meetings, staying quiet. Dorothy noticed him reading one day, a thick novel by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. 100 Years of Solitude, she said. "I tried to read it once. Too complicated for me." Sam looked up. "It's about family, memory, the cyclical nature of history. It's beautiful but tragic." "Like life," Dorothy said. "Exactly like life." They started talking about books, which led to talking about life. Sam was introduced to the group. 5 people from completely different backgrounds, brought together by circumstances, forming an unlikely family. Hope Haven operated on tight margins, government grants, private donations, volunteer staff. In April 2019, they received devastating news. Their primary grant wasn't renewed. The shelter would close in 60 days. The announcement sent panic through the residents. Where would they go? Detroit's shelter system was already overwhelmed. The waiting lists at other facilities were months long. The 5 friends sat together that night, processing the news. "We could try other cities," Marie suggested. "Maybe there are better shelters elsewhere." "Splitting up seems wrong," Sam said. "We've become, I don't know, a unit. A family of sorts." "Families stick together," Frank agreed. "In the military, you don't leave your unit behind." "But what's the alternative?" Walter asked practically. "We can't just create housing out of thin air." They were quiet. Then Dorothy said slowly, "What if we could?" "Could what?" "Create housing. Not out of thin air, but there are so many abandoned houses in Detroit. What if we found one and fixed it up? Made it livable?" "That's squatting," Walter pointed out. "It's illegal." "So is being homeless in a lot of places," Dorothy countered. "At least squatting keeps us together and gives us shelter." They debated it for days. The risks were real: arrest, eviction, the dangers of living in an abandoned structure. But the alternative was splitting up and ending up on the streets individually. Finally, they agreed they'd find an abandoned house and try to make it work. At least temporarily, until they could figure out something more permanent. They spent weeks scouting neighborhoods, looking for abandoned houses that might be viable. Most were too far gone: collapsed roofs, toxic mold, no utilities, dangerous structures. Then Sam found the house on Riverside Avenue. It was a 2-story brick house, built probably in the 1940s. It had been abandoned for at least 5 years based on records. The roof was mostly intact. The structure seemed sound. It had been marked for demolition, but the date kept getting pushed back due to budget issues. They watched the house for a week, making sure no one else was squatting there, that police didn't patrol regularly, that it was truly abandoned. "It's not much," Walter said, looking at the boarded-up windows, the overgrown yard, the peeling paint. "It's a palace compared to the streets," Marie countered. "It'll take work," Frank assessed. "But it's structurally sound. We can make it livable." "There's no power, no running water," Sam pointed out. "We'll figure it out," Dorothy said with determination. "People lived without electricity and plumbing for thousands of years. We can manage." In June 2019, when Hope Haven closed its doors, the 5 friends moved into the house on Riverside Avenue with their few possessions, $437 between them, and no real plan beyond survival. The first weeks were brutal. The house was filthy: years of dirt, animal droppings, broken glass, debris everywhere. They cleaned for days using supplies scrounged from dumpsters and donated from a church. Frank, with his mechanic skills, figured out how to jury-rig a basic electrical setup using a generator someone had thrown away and gas they bought with their precious cash. It gave them a few hours of light each evening. Water was harder. There was a working fire hydrant 2 blocks away. They filled containers each morning, exhausting work carrying gallons of water back to the house. For bathing, they worked out a system with a community center 3 blocks away. They'd go there to use the bathrooms and occasionally shower. It was humiliating but necessary. Food came from food banks, soup kitchens, and dumpster diving behind grocery stores. Dorothy, with her restaurant experience, could make meals from almost nothing. She taught the others how to stretch ingredients, how to make leftover bread edible, how to use food that was technically expired but still safe. They divided responsibilities. Walter handled repairs and maintenance. Frank dealt with security and external threats. Dorothy managed food. Marie handled cleaning and organization. Sam took care of documentation, tracking expenses, researching resources, writing letters to agencies for help. It wasn't comfortable. There was no heat as winter approached. They slept in sleeping bags, often wearing all their clothes. Privacy was minimal: 5 people sharing a small space. Tensions flared. Personalities clashed. But they had something precious: each other. And slowly, impossibly, the house started feeling like home. One day in July, Marie found a free bookshelf someone was giving away. They carried it 3 miles back to the house. Sam arranged his books on it and stood back, smiling. "It's starting to look like a home." Dorothy discovered a community garden nearby that welcomed anyone to take produce. She brought back tomatoes, zucchini, herbs. That night, she made a real meal: vegetable stew that actually tasted good. Everyone ate seconds. Frank found a job, cash only, under the table, helping a contractor with demolition work. It paid $50 a day. He gave every cent to the group fund. "We're in this together," he said when Walter tried to make him keep some. Walter fixed the front steps so they weren't a death trap. He reinforced the broken banister. Small improvements, but each one made their squat a little more livable. Marie started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other abuse survivors. It gave her purpose and helped her heal. She came home and told stories about the women she helped, her eyes bright with meaning. Sam started teaching again, sort of. He offered free tutoring to neighborhood kids at the community center. Word spread. Soon he had a dozen students, mostly children of struggling families who couldn't afford tutors. He didn't get paid, but the gratitude of parents and the progress of students fed his soul. These small victories kept them going. Each day was hard, but each day also had moments of grace. They'd known it was coming, but the notice taped to their door in September 2019 still hit like a blow. This property scheduled for demolition October 30th, 2019. All occupants must vacate immediately. No exceptions. 30 days. That's all they had. We start over, Frank said grimly. Find another squat. Or we split up, Dorothy said softly. Maybe it's time to face reality. We can't live like this forever. No, Marie said with unexpected fierceness. We don't give up. We figure something out. Like what? Walter asked, tired and discouraged. We have no money, no jobs, no options. Sam had been quiet, thinking, what if we bought it? Everyone stared at him. Bought it? Walter repeated. With what money? We have less than $500 between us. Houses in Detroit are selling for almost nothing in neighborhoods like this, Sam explained. Some for as little as $1,000. Maybe we could negotiate, get a loan, something. We have no credit. No income. No bank would give us a loan, Dorothy pointed out. Not a bank. But maybe there's another way. That conversation late into the night was the beginning of something impossible becoming possible. Sam spent the next week at the public library, researching everything he could about Detroit's housing market, property laws, assistance programs, and creative financing. What he discovered was both hopeful and daunting. Detroit had thousands of abandoned homes. The city was actually trying to get rid of them. They cost money to maintain, attracted crime, and dragged down neighborhoods. Through various programs, houses could be bought for as little as $1,000, sometimes less. But there were catches. Buyers had to prove they could renovate the property within a certain time frame. They had to have some income or assets. They had to pass background checks. We don't qualify for any of the official programs, Sam reported back. But I found something interesting. The house we're in is privately owned, not city-owned. It's owned by a bank that foreclosed on it years ago. So? Frank asked. So banks hate holding on to properties that cost them money. They have to pay taxes, insurance, maintenance. They're motivated to sell, sometimes for almost nothing, just to get properties off their books. We still have no money, Walter reminded him. We have $437. And we have something else. We have skills. We can offer to renovate. We can find grants or loans. We can get creative. Dorothy shook her head. Even if the bank would sell to us, we'd need money for permits, materials, utilities. It's impossible. Maybe, Sam acknowledged. But what if we tried? What's the worst that happens? They say no and we're exactly where we are now, losing our home in 3 weeks. But what if they say yes? Marie looked around at the house they'd worked so hard to clean, to make livable. I say we try. I'm tired of giving up before we fight. One by one, they agreed. It was insane. It probably wouldn't work. But they'd try anyway. Walter volunteered to make the call. He was the most respectable looking of the group, the one with the steadiest voice, the least obvious signs of homelessness. He dressed in his best clothes, still worn, but clean. He went to the library, used their phone, and called the bank that owned the property. It took 6 transfers before he reached someone in their real estate-owned, REO, department. A woman named Jessica Mills. Hi, I'm calling about a property you own at 847 Riverside Avenue in Detroit. I'm interested in purchasing it. Jessica pulled up the file. That property is scheduled for demolition. We're not selling it. What if I could take it off your hands? Save you the demolition costs. Sir, demolition is already scheduled and paid for. And frankly, the property is in terrible condition. We wouldn't even know what to sell it for. Walter took a breath. Ms. Mills, can I be honest with you? Please. I'm 71 years old. I'm homeless. I lost everything in 2008 and never recovered. I'm living in that house right now with 4 other people in the same situation. We're all older, all trying to survive. That demolition notice is our death sentence. We'll end up on the streets. But if you'd consider selling us the house, for whatever price you think is fair, we'll renovate it. We have skills. We'll make it valuable again. We'll turn a liability into an asset for the neighborhood." There was a long silence. Walter thought she'd hung up. Then, "You're living in it now?" "Yes, ma'am. We've been cleaning it, making basic repairs. We're not criminals. We're just people who ran out of options." Another pause. "Mr. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name." "Walter. Walter Jackson." "Mr. Jackson, I need to be honest. What you're asking is extremely unusual. The bank doesn't typically sell to people in your situation. The liability alone." "I understand. But Ms. Mills, we're desperate. We're not asking for charity. We'll pay whatever you think is fair. We'll sign whatever liability waivers you need. We just need a chance. Can you give me a few days? I need to talk to my supervisor. And I'll need to see the property, meet you and your housemates." "Yes. Absolutely. Thank you for even considering this." Walter hung up, shaking. He had no idea if it would lead anywhere, but it was a start. 3 days later, Jessica Mills drove to 847 Riverside Avenue. She was in her 30s, professional, clearly uncomfortable in this neighborhood. A colleague came with her, an older man named Bill from risk management. The 5 friends had prepared. They'd cleaned the house as best they could. They'd dressed in their best clothes. They'd prepared a presentation. Jessica and Bill walked through the property, taking notes, looking skeptical. The house was livable, barely, but it was obviously in rough shape. When they finished the tour, the 5 friends sat them down at the kitchen table. Sam spoke first. "Thank you for coming. We know this is unusual. We know we don't look like typical homebuyers. But we want to tell you our story." He introduced everyone. Walter talked about his decades at Ford, his wife's death, his fall into homelessness. Dorothy described her restaurant, her 20 years of hard work that ended in bankruptcy. Frank spoke quietly about Vietnam, PTSD, his journey to sobriety. Marie, with difficulty, shared her story of abuse and escape. Sam admitted his gambling addiction and his work to overcome it. "We're not asking for pity," Sam concluded. "We're asking for a chance. We believe in second chances. We believe that our lives aren't over just because we're older and we've failed. We've proven we can work together. We've kept this house from falling apart further. Give us ownership, and we'll restore it properly." Jessica was clearly moved but uncertain. Bill, the risk manager, was skeptical. "You have no income," Bill pointed out. "How would you pay for renovations?" "We'll find work. We'll apply for grants. There are programs that help renovate properties in distressed neighborhoods. We'll get creative," Walter said. "And if you default, if you can't make this work, then you're no worse off than you are now," Dorothy said. "Right now, you're paying for demolition. You're paying property taxes on a worthless asset. Sell it to us for $1 and you're free of it. We succeed, the neighborhood gets better. We fail, you're still rid of the property." Jessica and Bill excused themselves to talk privately. The 5 friends waited, anxious, barely breathing. When they came back, Jessica said, "This is probably the craziest thing I've ever done professionally. But Bill and I talked, and we've decided to recommend this to our superiors. We can't make promises, but..." She paused. "The bank will sell you the property for $1,000. You'll need to get it insured, bring utilities up to code within 6 months, and complete major renovations within 2 years. If you can meet those terms, it's yours." The 5 friends stared, unable to believe what they were hearing. $1,000. Walter repeated. "Plus closing costs, probably another $500. And you'll need to form an LLC or some legal entity to hold the property. And you'll need insurance. But yes, $1,000 for the house itself." Sam did quick math. "We have $437. We need another $1,063. Plus money for insurance, LLC formation, initial repairs." "We'll find it," Marie said firmly. "We'll find a way." They had 30 days to raise about $2,000 and get everything in order. It seemed impossible. But they'd agreed to try. Sam wrote their story and posted it on a crowdfunding website. He was honest about everything: their homelessness, their struggles, their hope to buy and renovate the house. He set a goal of $5,000, enough to cover purchase costs and start renovations. The campaign went nowhere at first. A few donations, mostly $5 or $10 from strangers. They were $1,900 short with 2 weeks to go. Then something unexpected happened. A local news station saw the campaign and thought it would make a good human interest story. They interviewed the 5 friends, filmed the house, and aired a segment. The segment went viral. Not nationally, but locally. Detroit had been through so much economic devastation that the story of 5 older people trying to rebuild resonated. People saw themselves, their parents, their neighbors in these 5 faces. Donations started pouring in. $20, $50, $100. A retired teacher sent $500 with a note, "For Sam, a fellow educator. Don't give up." A woman who'd lost her restaurant sent $200 to Dorothy. "I understand. Keep cooking." A Vietnam veteran sent $300 to Frank. "Thank you for your service. Welcome home." Local businesses donated materials. A plumbing company offered to help with water line repairs. An electrical contractor volunteered to do the work to get power restored safely. Within a week, they'd raised $8,000. Enough for purchase, insurance, LLC formation, and initial renovations. The 5 friends sat around their table, looking at the crowdfunding total on Sam's borrowed laptop, crying with disbelief and gratitude. "People care," Marie whispered. "People we've never met care about whether we succeed." "We can't let them down," Walter said. "We have to make this work." On October 25, 2019, 5 days before their scheduled eviction, the 5 friends sat in a lawyer's office, legal services donated pro bono, and signed papers. They'd formed an LLC called Riverside Revival with all 5 as equal partners. They'd scraped together insurance. They'd met every requirement. The lawyer handed Walter the deed. "Congratulations. You now own 847 Riverside Avenue." Walter held the paper, this simple document that represented everything, and couldn't speak. Frank put a hand on his shoulder. Dorothy wiped away tears. Marie smiled brighter than she had in years. Sam said what they were all thinking. "We did it. We actually did it." That night, they celebrated in their house, not a squat, not a temporary shelter, but their home. Dorothy cooked a feast with donated groceries. They sat around their table, eating and laughing and planning. "This is just the beginning," Frank said. "Now comes the hard part, actually renovating this place." "We've done hard before," Marie said. "We can do it again." They were right about it being hard. Over the next 18 months, they worked T.